Welcome to Let's Plant Houses, the podcast where we talk about some incredible families' journeys. I'm your host, Wendy Ernson. Whether you're a parent, a caregiver, or you're simply seeking to understand more about this journey, you're in the right place. So today I have Janice joining me on the show, sharing her family's story, and I want to thank you so much for being here.
Glad to be here. Thanks for asking.
Absolutely. So if you wouldn't mind, Janice, I'd love if you could start by just telling us a little bit about your family.
Sure. Our nuclear family consists of me, the mom, my husband, Rich Feldman. We have two adult children, Micah, who's almost 40, and our daughter, Emma, who is almost 36 years old. So we've been on this journey of learning to be a family, falling in love with each other. Our son, Micah, has what now is called an intellectual disability. Used to be referred to as mental retardation or cognitive impairment, low IQ, whatever. As we talk more, I'll tell you about his life, which is, as someone said, enviable life, and with a lot of meaning and purpose and fun and struggles as well. So my husband and I were active in, and have been for years, in social justice issues. So initially, we were involved in the anti-war movement, the women's movement, so many social justice issues, but we didn't think about disability as being part of the movement. And I'm a social worker by background, so I sort of saw it as a special education issue. So we live in a very different world now, 2024, than when Mike was born in 1984, and I'll share a little bit about that journey as well. I can move into telling you a little bit about that if you'd like.
That'd be amazing. I'd love to hear about how it all started.
Yeah. So when Micah was born, he was, had some fine motor skill issues. He was developmentally delayed. We started therapy early. But eventually, when he was about 5, we learned that his disability was lifelong.
Okay.
We weren't sure exactly what that meant. He didn't have a specific disability like Down syndrome or Fragile X or whatever. Fragile, yeah, I think it's X.
I think you're right.
Yeah, okay, thank you. But we knew that there were going to be, things were going to be quite like his peers.
Right.
So we... initially there were all the emotions that many of us faced. Guilt, shame, worry, fear, probably fear being the biggest one. Can I do this? What does this mean?
What does it look like?
Yes, what does it look like?
What's the path?
Exactly. Right. We make the path by walking it, right? By stumbling over those rocks and moving them. He was in a very integrated neighborhood preschool program. He received some therapy back then, and then we enrolled him in public school. He was in a special education class. That was pretty much the norm then. Some people call it a segregated classroom. All the kids with disabilities were in it. He seemed to be fine. And then one day he came home, and this is such a true story, and he said, in his own way, I want to go in the same door as my friends. So he knew that he was being, that a different place was being created for him.
Was that because the neighborhood had kids of all abilities, so he was playing with them after school, but he wasn't going to school with them?
Yeah, it was called, there was always euphemism.
So he's like, my friends who I play with every day when I come home from school aren't in my classroom.
Yeah, or the kids I see in my neighborhood.
Yeah.
He wasn't always easy to play with, but yes,
But
absolutely. He saw it. And we thought, how do we do this? I mean, all we knew was special education. You have to remember this is back in 1800s. It felt like it, 1989, 1990.
Yeah.
So.
There's still institutions then.
Yeah. Yes, there were. And so we listened to him. And I guess if, what I'm aware of, and perhaps I'll end with a story, we had to follow his dreams, and that was his dream. And so we were lucky to learn about this thing called inclusion.
Okay.
And so eventually, within the year, Micah became the first student who was fully included in the Berkeley School District.
Amazing.
No one knew how to do it, what to do, but we had enough people that we sought out in the Metro Detroit area that helped us understand that Micah could learn in his own way in the regular classroom.
Great.
And I always say it was scary. You doubt yourself as a parent. Is this the right thing?
Because you're going against the norm, like what's there in front of you.
Right, and it felt like if I might say, an insult to everybody who was in doing the special ed classroom, right? Like, what's wrong with my program?
Right.
But we prevailed, and we sought out resources all across the country. I'm a social worker by background, so I know the importance of finding who are the people out there who are on the cutting edge, the visionaries. Yeah. And so, through elementary, middle, high school, he was fully included. There were a number of things that helped make that happen. One is we had pretty regular meetings to talk about what was working, what were we learning.
With the teachers and the teams?
Yes, yes. We had one teacher consultant who was so wise. Actually, Micah is still in touch with him. Oh. And he would start out the meetings once he knew us and realized we weren't going to bite his head off, right. Because we do come in forcefully as parents. He would start off the meetings in the beginning of the year saying, Janice and Rich already know what Micah can't do.
Right.
These meetings are to talk about what is he beginning to do and how do we support his growth in his area. A huge
what a different
shift.
Way of looking at that, yeah.
Absolutely.
It probably set the tone so differently for you to have those meetings.
Yes, yes. And we always began with very short, good news kind of stories. And at first people were like hesitant, wait, we can't tell you about what we're struggling with. No, but we're going to start the meeting talking about, for example, one of the teachers said, I saw Micah playing with Katie over on the playground during, recess. Just those tidbits are what, motivate you. That's the food that nourishes your spirit, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we learned about from the folks in Toronto, Marcia Forrest, Jack Pearpoint. These were the visionaries of around inclusion about circles of friends. And so we created with the support of the staff, who was a little bit hesitant because nobody had ever done this, but there were kids that met with Mike on a regular basis. In a way, almost like, every week. So they would do games at recess time or have lunch together. It wasn't a therapy group. It was really, in some ways, like a student group, a student organization.
Oh, that's probably similar. I think now some of the schools they're called links.
That's different, but it's similar
different. Oh,
because we actually, yes. So they met and... this could be a whole nother program. I'm welcome to come back and talk about that because it's so critical to Micah's life and to the people who have been in Micah's circle over 30 years. Not the same people, but always evolving. So that circle was really important. I'll give you so they would have fun together. Mm-hmm. But if there was an issue, there was a safe place it was facilitated by the social worker where kids could talk and Micah could grow in his understanding. So I'll give you an example. So when Micah, he didn't have a lot of words in the beginning for several years, and he wasn't always easy to understand. And so to get people's attention, he would take his fingers and poke on their shoulder. Mm-hmm. And that would make everybody go wild, get away, I don't want to be around you, right? And kids don't know the adults don't know how to graciously say, could you please stop doing that or something. So the social worker did a workshop or a conversation about, people being irritating sometimes, they don't mean to be. So it was more generic and, and they talked about what do you do and what makes you, uncomfortable or... and then he wove into very respectfully the fact that sometimes, Michael, when you want to get attention, you poke at people's shoulders.
Right.
And so it can be irritating, and the kids were like looking. And so then they, in a fun, respectful way, role-played that. Oh. And then they talked about what could we do together when Micah, you start to poke. And so they decided that they would use the hand motion, like stop, and put it in front of him and say, stop doing that and I'll talk to you in 5 minutes or something like that.
Right.
So the magic, the gold in that is that it worked some of the time, but the kids learned what we all still are learning, how to have difficult conversations in a respectful way.
Yeah.
And Micah learned that his circle could be a resource for him. So that, and I have many stories like that that exemplify how important it was, not just to Micah, but in a documentary we did on Micah, as one of the students said, it became a support group for all of us, So circle of friends has been really important. And now that Micah lives, 450 miles away from us. That's a longer story. I'll talk a little bit about it, but he still has a circle of friends. And that becomes really important to us as his parents.
Right,
because we're not right there.
And we may not all be here forever.
We will not be.
Right?
We will not
and
be.
So he may be here longer. Yeah. And so he needs his community that's
Yes.
beyond just his family.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the word is intentional.
Yes.
That we have to be intentional and we have to grow in our spirit to be able to ask for help without apology, but with dignity and intention. So circles were really important. And I have much more of it described in some of my work and some of my books and websites and all that kind of thing. But the other thing was technology. Micah doesn't read or write.
Okay.
He speaks all over the country about his life. But technology, and now we all have it, we all know it because we all talk to Siri and everybody else that I don't know, right? But in the beginning, the technology allowed him to speak, and I remember very clearly the first email he ever sent me, it said, "Hi, Mom, it's Micah."
Did you just about start bawling? Because I would be just overwhelmed with emotion.
Yeah, absolutely.
What a gift.
Yeah, and I'm worried by the fact that so many young people are afraid sometimes to use technology. I mean, we had to make a decision. It evolved over time. It wasn't like at a specific moment, but we sought out resources to help Micah read in a similar way that you or I might, and we worked on that, and we found great folks. But to really be able to strengthen his ability to read that way, it would have taken years.
Yep.
And the question was, what was it doing to his self-esteem?
And what's the ultimate goal?
Yes.
Right? So it's like, what do you want? You want to empower him to eventually do things independently, whatever that is, in whatever way it is.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so you realize, like my daughter, we gave up on handwriting. We tried, and she was upset. And she would struggle, and she would cry, and she'd have episodes and all these things. Finally, we said, why are we doing this?
Yes.
So we taught her to type.
Yes. Beautiful.
Yes.
Yes.
So
exactly.
I was going to say maybe it's not the exact same thing, but
it is.
Yeah.
And it truly is. These are a word I would never have used. In fact, it wasn't even used to the 1980s. But ableism. We all struggle with different kinds of ableism. Racism, sexism. It's there.
the isms kind of stink.
But they exist.
Yeah.
And this idea that there's only one way to do something.
Right.
Is really the gifts of our children, because they show us, hey, I don't have to do it your way.
Right.
I can roll. I can dance in my wheelchair. I can point to something.
Right.
But, it makes it sound like I was enlightened in the beginning. I mean, I'm still being enlightened, right? But it was a process of recognizing my own history, where I grew up. I was going to be a social worker that worked with kids with disabilities. And all of a sudden now I was a parent. And I go, wait a minute, this is not what I thought I was going to do.
Right.
Thank goodness that I grew into this world that has changed my life and made it much much richer and much more beautiful in so many ways. So Michael was fully included. So I'm stumbling on all these circle stories I could tell, but he one of them was I quickly tell one of them was kids noticed that Michael was hanging out with his teachers more.
Okay.
Because teachers were more patient.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
And so they said at one of the circle meetings in high school, Micah, you need to ask 5 girls to dance at the next school dance.
Okay.
And they helped orchestrate that.
Yeah.
And he did. He counted 5 girls, and then he went up to one of the kids in a circle and say, "So now can I go talk to my teacher?" But it strengthened a sense of community as well, right?
And more people he could trust.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And they also learned, you know. So he was going to leave high school, and so where do many of his friends go? College. And so he came home and said, I'm going to college.
Mm-hmm. Now, would you define this as maybe one of your let's plan a house moments? Like when you were like, as a parent, you're like, that's interesting. How am I going to make this impossible situation possible? Because where do I even begin?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, well said. Yeah, thanks, Micah. You go off and, do what you want to do. And Rich and I are sitting there going, now, how do we make that happen?
Right.
So one of the things that you learn to do is to keep reaching out, keep looking. And so we contacted some people. What do you know is happening? Because there was a whole new generation of kids who had been fully included.
Right. Who also might have those dreams.
That's right. And so we found that there were a few students around the country who were auditing a class, or they found a cool teacher who'd say, sure, come sit in on my class.
But really custom situations or specific. Okay.
Very much. And, with a lot of us who had families who had resources that could spend some time looking for that kind of thing. So to make a very long story short, in about a year and a half, we got together several people, some key people at Oakland schools and Oakland University, and we created a fully inclusive program for about 8 students, including Micah, to start going to Oakland University and be a college guy.
It's amazing.
And now
May I ask what year was this?
It would be like 2004.
Wow. So that's still really recent. You think about it. It was only 20 years ago.
Well, wait till I tell you how it's grown.
Then you keep going.
No. I love when you interject because you're right. And so there's Micah taking the bus up to OU. He had to take 2 buses by himself.
Our transportation's groovy around here.
Yeah. He was one of the few people who knew how to take a bus. He learned how to take a bus from one of his friends. And every day, 5 days a week, he sat in on 2 or usually about 3 classes.
That's a long day that's just a long day.
And then he's got to take the bus back. We're at 11 and Woodward, and, it could be an hour and a half easily ride. And he did that for 3 or 4 years, got involved in student organizations, just grew exponentially in his confidence. And, it's a really, in many ways, college campuses are almost like they're communities, and it has a certain safety and a boundary to them. And then after about 4 years, we were moving his younger sister Emma to college, and we helped her move into a dorm in Massachusetts. And he was starting to get it, what that would mean. And he came home and he said, after we dropped her off, I want to live in a dorm like my sister.
Right.
I want to put my own posters on the wall, and I want to get unlimited ice cream. And I want cable TV, because my parents would never have cable TV.
Because he wants his own independence, right?
Absolutely.
Set his schedule, do the things he wants to do. Who doesn't want that?
So we worked with the university, and ready to go. They gave him the move-in date. They collected the $100 initial fee, and then they sent us an email and said, we don't think this is right. So they rescinded their decision.
What?
And the day that they decided that was actually one of Micah's circle of friends meeting, which was being held then at Oakland University. And Micah told the news, and the friends said, and it happened to be a couple professors and students, and they said, Micah, you got to fight this.
Right.
And so, long 2-year battle. He spoke at the Board of Trustees meeting. He had 20 kids speak. They had rallies on campus. He did petitions. He ends up suing the university.
I'm assuming this is because of his rights were being violated.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, he, a key part to this is that he had learned a lot about disability history and culture.
Okay.
Most of us don't know that the longest sit-in ever was done in 1977 in San Francisco by 100 people with disabilities for 23 days.
Oh, my gosh.
Lived in the federal building to protest the delay of the implementation of Section 504. We don't know that. We do not know that. Micah knew that because he was able to go to leadership retreats for youth with disabilities. We learned that as parents. He learned about who Justin Dart was, D-A-R-T, the father of the Americans with Disability Act. So he knew his community had activists and they had stood up for their rights.
And had been successful in some instances.
Right.
So that tells you that it can work.
Exactly. That's right. And so he sues the university, and December of 2009, after the hearing occurred with the federal judge, Judge Duggan, Patrick Duggan, he got a call. We were in Florida at the time, and Judge Duggan ruled in his favor. Amazing. And in January of 2010, he moved into the dorm. Became CNN's most intriguing person of the day and got on NPR.
You're like, that's my kid.
Yeah, well, stories are, there's a quote I like, words are how we think, but stories are how we link, how we connect, how we learn our strength.
Yeah.
And so his ability to tell a story through PowerPoint, he was called to do that, and I do that for a living as well. So he started speaking around the country, and he ended up speaking at Syracuse University, which is known for its disability studies program. It's a lot of social justice issues there as well.
Okay.
So he was there for a week speaking and then also going to workshops. Mm-hmm. And this is another true story. He called us from Syracuse, and he said, "This is where I want to move. They get me." He knew in his bones that he was around people who understood that disability isn't a deficiency, it's a difference.
Right.
And so, this story is long, but, so here I will share with you two things. So eventually, 6 months later, he moved. He has been living there for 10 years with supports.
Yep.
He has a circle of friends. And, Wendy, I have to tell you, he's a teaching assistant in 2 classes at the University in Education.
It's just fantastic. It's inspirational.
And inspirational, somebody said, is, when we got goosebumps. I mean, I still get goosebumps.
Yeah, absolutely.
Micah, I know in his own way, wants to empower people to know that, I'll say this, there's nothing exceptional about Micah. I mean, I think he is because I'm the mom, but what's exceptional is his community and the fact that he knows how to ask for help. He believes that his dreams are legitimate. Mm-hmm. So do I think every kid with a disability should go to college? Absolutely not, As Micah would say, no, you have to ask them what their dream is.
Right, because is that what they want?
Right.
What is a meaningful life to them?
Yes,
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So,
but we want that path available. And people like Micah make sure that that access is there, because he's going to keep reminding you that, nope, people deserve to have this if this is what they want, just like anyone.
Yes. So the final story I'll tell about.
Oh no, that's why we're here. You're supposed to tell stories.
Well, the piece on this that I want, because you were so right when you said, Micah going to college, there were only a few people doing that. I want you to know that 12 years later.
Oh, Oakland. So they had 8 students in the initial
students.
class.
Okay.
Right.
Oakland University, unfortunately, closed the program. However, there are now 350 programs across the United States. 350. That's a mini revolution. And we just attended the 10-year anniversary of the Inclusive U program at Syracuse University. There are 100 students currently enrolled in that program, and they've graduated over 320 students.
So if parents wanted access, so they would know which places they could send their kids that would be best suited to give them this experience, how would you find that out?
Yes, absolutely. Go to thinkcollege.net.
Okay.
And be prepared to spend a week looking at beautiful, highly organized for parents, transition counselors, students.
Because I know a lot of universities have what they call like disabilities. I'm sorry.
Resource center.
Yeah, and I've heard that they aren't always that great. So it's good to know that there's what you're describing sounds like people or places that are really focused on it, and so they probably do it very well.
Right, and there's been and the Think College programs, that's not always what they're called, but the post-secondary education programs for students with intellectual disabilities aren't necessarily connected to the disability services.
I think they're different.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. So thinkcollege.net, run by incredible human beings. So that is, yes, and I guess, so that's Micah's story with hopefully nuggets of what has to happen. We've learned over time that we can't accept. We have to work towards great expectations.
Right.
That we have to learn how to be able to ask for help with dignity. That we have to seek out the support of Micah's peers and break the silence around disability. And we have to look at our own ableism as parents. What is it that is stopping us from loving the way our child might do things a little bit differently?
Or what limits are we setting for them that shouldn't exist?
Yes.
I mean, I don't know if you saw this. I know that we're, okay. So I don't know if you saw this recently, but there was this video online that showed someone with Down syndrome.
Yeah.
Did you see it?
Yeah.
Okay, so for those folks who don't know, you must look it up.
Yes.
But so there's this woman who's an adult with Down syndrome who's basically showing what people think her life is like and which her limits are. But then she pushes through those limits and says, yeah, but you know what? Why can't I go out and get a drink? Why can't I go out and go dancing? Why can't I go and live my life like any adult? Because you know what? If you set these limits for me, then of course I'll be limited, but maybe I can.
Yes.
Maybe I can do those things.
Yes.
So I agree that we shouldn't, as much as because it's hard as parents. And I think like what you just described, like surrounding yourself with others also helps push your limits maybe a little bit so that way you won't be so tunneled about what they can and can't do.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Can I leave you with a quick story?
I would love that. Yeah.
So this is a story. I mean, my big campaign always is about asking for help, seeking support.
And that's probably what you tell families new on their journey.
Absolutely. Many, many things. So, Micah was flying from Syracuse to Detroit, and he really doesn't like to fly, and he had to fly by himself. And as we went to pick him up, we learned that there was some terrible turbulence. And we thought, here he is in the plane, how's he dealing with it?
Right, you're ready to handle whatever happens when he gets off that flight.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. And so the plane did land. He came down that escalator. I saw him, and I didn't, I moved towards him, and we hugged, and he took a deep breath, and eventually I said, Micah, how did you get through that? What was that like? And he said, well, I told the person next to me that I was really scared, and then I asked him if I could hold his hand. And that's the world I want to live in, Wendy.
Yeah.
Where we can be vulnerable. We won't always get what we want, but sometimes someone will hold our hand or will hold their hand. Yeah, so thanks. It's such a joy to share this. I really appreciate the work you're doing.
I am so grateful that you could be on the show today, Janice, and hearing about you and hearing about Micah, and just leaving us with that story about just thinking about humanity in a different way. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you for that. Yeah, okay. For those of you listening in, thank you again so much for joining us today. And I also hope you'll consider subscribing, leaving a review, or sharing this podcast with others who also might find it meaningful. So please join us next time on Let's Plant Houses. Take care.